on nation building, first of all, one has to say that it's an imported concept, not only conceptually and not only through colonialism, but also history required that after colonialism, that all these places that used to be colonies, territories especially, had to become nation states. So that was the idea of what that is was never quite clear, and also it did not always fit what was going on, what kind of societies we actually had in Southeast Asia, for example. Now, where Malaysia is concerned, if we want to talk about nation building in Malaysia, we have to look at the colonial history, and not only that, but also the geopolitical history itself. So when Malaysia came into being, that was during the Cold War, and the British had, of course, just come out of the Second World War. The Japanese had lost through a very sudden capitulation, right, because of through the nuclear bombs, and so one has to say that we were part of some kind of damage control that the colonialists had to put into place. They could no longer control the world. The idea of nationalism had grown very strong throughout the world. India had fallen, gone back and became independent in 47, I think. And so all countries, all colonies were going to follow suit. But of course it was not given where the boundaries should go. Should Malaya be a country, or should it be bigger than that, smaller than that? Should Malaya be a few countries perhaps, because it was ruled differently? Certain parts were ruled differently during colonialism. You had the Strait settlements, you had the Federated Malay States, and the unfederated Malay States. So it's all really quite complicated. And we also have to look at what the situation was geopolitically. Who were the big powers in the region? If you go back to 45 alone, the Japanese had just surrendered, so they would withdraw from the region totally. And then you had the Americans coming in from the Pacific, controlling the Philippines and having just won the war against Japan. And then of course you had the British and the other European powers around. So those were the big powers. So what do you do with all these little colonies that were around? What do you do with Vietnam? What do you do with Malaysia, the Malayan territories, and the Dutch territory that was humongous, right? Big. So it's that context one has to think of. And then nation building happens, but we notice also immediately, I won't go into all the details, we had to have a federation. Now what is special about federation? Federation is an admission that there is too much diversity. Right? So you sort of try to delegate power to different levels, so that not everyone will be unhappy. If you centralize too much, then you're denying the diversity of a place, and that can lead to trouble, right? In the case of Malaysia, it was also a federation of sultanates. As you know, after the Malayan Union failed, all the sultans and the party UMNO got together and talked to the British and said, we have to have another system, we cannot accept the Malayan Union. And out of that, you had a federation of Malaya. So a federation of sultanates. At the same time, many of the sultanates were different in themselves, right? Kelantan is not Johor. Johor is not Selangor. Selangor is not Perak. And then if you throw in Malacca and Penang, then even more diverse. And so you had a federation, and that seemed acceptable to most people. But as we know, over the last 60 years or so, nation building in Malaysia for some reason became a centralizing process. I think especially under Tun Mahathir. And I think we've come to a point now in the 21st century where this can't go on. The diversity of Malaysia cannot be denied. And I think in recent years we're seeing that happen. I've not mentioned East Malaysia. Of course, once East Malaysia got into the equation since 63, and then Singapore leaving. You know, you have the MA 63 to deal with, and we are dealing with it on a daily basis at the moment. What Sarawak wants, what Sabah wants, is not necessarily what Kuala Lumpur and Putrajaya might want. So for Malaysian building to progress peacefully and successfully, I think we have to seriously look at our federalism, the federal system, and work out how best for each region in Malaysia to develop itself and at the same time contribute to the national project itself. Now, we are talking here only about the country itself, and we're looking inwards, and we're talking about the internal discourses. But nations are not built in a vacuum. They are built surrounded by other countries. They are built surrounded by big powers, wanting to have a say, and so on. So it is actually necessary going forward for Malaysia to be more extroverted, to look at region building, I would say, and not just nation building. So nation building and region building have to be connected, especially given today's geopolitical changes and tensions. Yeah. And I suspect that's what Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim somehow realizes, and that's why he's been traveling around so much, because he has to place Malaysia and give Malaysia a position and a promise of proactiveness beyond Malaysia itself. The Malaysian voice should be important regionally and globally. So I think that is good, because that will force the Malaysian national discourse to not be too introverted, where we only talk race, religion, and so on and so forth, where we don't really accept diversity. We just live with the diversity. We're not comfortable with it. Now, that wasn't how Malaysia started, as far as I remember when I was young. Malaysia was supposed to be a place where diversity would be accepted and celebrated and become a strength. And that would be what would define Malaysia in the world. We left that path a long time ago. I think we need to go back to it, and that path is best understood through the federal system that we have. So we need to reform the federal system so that the diversity is recognized, and that the states and subnational units can come into their own.